Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on July 27th, Monday morning for the ACA Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective. I'm Robert Theobald, the Small Business Ombudsman and Vice President of Small Business Services here at the Arizona Commerce Authority. We're excited for this great session we have today. I want to first start by thanking all of our community partners. We could not run these bootcamp sessions without their support and their expertise. They've been a great partner through this process, and we look forward to future collaboration with them as well. The Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective is designed to help small businesses return from the COVID crisis stronger than ever. It is a statewide initiative supported by our community partners, and it is a daily boot camp that we're continuing through July and will continue additionally throughout August in various formats. So the Small Business Bootcamp, you can find the registration and the content on our website under the Small Business Bootcamp. And they've been Monday through Friday webinars since the beginning of May. All of them have been recorded, and those recordings can be found on our website from the previous sessions, and you can also register for upcoming sessions on the same location. Additionally, on that website, you can find our resource collective, and the link to this will take you to a page that has all the resources provided by our community partners to help small businesses stay strong and return stronger. So this week we have a bunch of great sessions planned. We have practical strategies to lead your company through COVID-19 on today's session. On Tuesday, how the community can best support small businesses. Wednesday is removing friction from your business. Thursday is an update on the Paycheck Protection Program. And Friday is using finance to grow your business. So some quick updates on the PPP program. Still a lot of funds remaining. It was extended through August 8th, as we've talked about. But one key date came out today or over the weekend. Just out this morning was the SBA forgiveness system that they've set up, and banks will be able to start processing the SBA forgiveness portion on August 10th. That is pending any changes that may come about that will require updates, but they're projecting an August 10th start date for the forgiveness system that the lenders will use to help get the forgiveness. So that's exciting. We also had some updates. We had an additional 800 loans over the past week and a half for Arizona. For small businesses, and if you've been following the numbers, you'll notice that the average has dropped just a little bit, indicating a lot of additional small businesses getting those loans in the PPP. So some ACA programs can help your small business out there. We've got our small business services. We have our workforce division that can help with finding employees and training your employees and upskilling your employees. Then we have our Arizona Manufacturing Extension Partnership, Arizona MEP, that can provide A to Z coverage for manufacturers in Arizona wanting to establish, grow, whatever your needs are. They can work with you to help your manufacturing operation. A quick reminder of the state's COVID website, arizonatogether.org, for all information on the COVID-19 crisis. And this is just a quick page with some links to our resources that are on our resource collective and our website. These are guides that have been put together by the community partners. We posted anywhere from restaurants, retail, salons, construction. There's a guide that can help you out. Additionally, we have our Arizona Business Resources COVID-19 page. This is constantly updated with the most recent information. So please take a look at that for your business resources. So with that, I want to introduce, we have Thiru. I cannot pronounce his last name. I pre-apologize to him for that, but he's the CEO of MST Solutions. MST Solutions is a local business that Thiru started out of his home office and has grown to include up to over 300 people and provides solutions for small businesses. So we were really excited to have him here today, one of our own local entrepreneurs. So Thiru, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let you share yours and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Thanks for the introduction. Let me share my screen here. Let me go into slideshow. Can you see my slides?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Robert. Again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about my own learnings about how to lead through the COVID-19 crisis. We are almost 4 months into this crisis. I felt like I've gone through a lot of learnings in terms of how to look at the organization and how to create, inspire the organization during this difficult time. So what I have is I have a few slides. Feel free to stop me anytime if you have any questions. You can ask questions through chat or stop me there. We can make this interactive as well, and also we'll have some time at towards the end for Q&A. So with that, let me just move on to the agenda here. So I want to start a little bit by talking about the notion of core values and purpose. Start there, and then talk about some of the key leadership perspectives that we all need to have as we are looking to lead our organization through this. And then key building blocks for leadership, organizational conversation. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. How do you have conversations with your organization during this crisis? I'll talk a little bit about psychological safety and why that is very important in this context. And then I'll wrap it up with talking about some communication strategies, and then talk a little bit about building trust. And then we'll have some Q&A after that. So I want to start out by talking about a story from 1982, Tylenol Crisis. So what happened was they had one of these, the Tylenol, the seal was broken. I think someone injected some poison into this Tylenol tablet. And because of that, what happened was 7 people died in Chicago. And Johnson & Johnson's market share dropped to 7% from 35% in a span of a couple of months. And they had to spend $100 million to recall 31 million bottles of Tylenol. This, as you can imagine, this was a crisis. This was a major disaster. And Johnson & Johnson had to figure out a way to see how they can come out of this crisis. Their chairman and CEO, James Burke, what he did was he said, we are in a crisis mode. Let's just go back to whatever credos are, which are his core values, J&J's core values and purpose. And he said, let's just go to our credo and make the decision based on what our credo talks about. And the credo was obvious: do the right thing for the customers, followed by employees, followed by stakeholders, shareholders. And he used that as an approach to say, I'm going to make all these decisions, whether that means I'm going to spend $100 million to recall 31 million bottles of Tylenol. And he said, I'm going to relaunch the product in tamper-proof packaging. And he owned up the responsibility as well, that they made a mess, and he took responsibility. And he said, here is what they're going to do to fix it. And he used the credos, which were like 150 years old, to make that decision. And after they relaunched the packaging and all of that, within a year, J&J was back to 30% within the market share in that category. And this is a great example. When you are in a crisis mode, you have to go back to the core values or the purpose of your organization to figure out how do you make those decisions. Because these are all tough decisions. There's no easy answer to any of these decisions. But I thought I would start out with this as an example, as a case study to talk about when the times get tough, how do you pivot the company, and what is the framework or reference point that you would use to pivot the company? And the credo or core values is a great example of what that really looks like. So I want to start off with this example story there. So I want to talk a little bit about how I've been thinking about this over the last 4 months or so. We had to make a lot of tough decisions along the way. One of the things that I said in the beginning of the process was, it's interesting, making decisions based on core values is always the right thing. But in the moment of heightened crisis that we are all in, this becomes even more important. This is a good time to reflect on our core values and say whether we have the right set of values or not. If not, look at redesigning them as well. So beginning of that, I said we're going to make a lot of tough decisions as a company, and we're going to work through all of them. but the simple framework or the lens through which we'll make those decisions is to set out those core values. And that really made this decision-making process very simple for me personally, and also for me to explain the context behind these decisions to the broader group organization. And I think the other part is using purpose to guide through the organization as a crisis is a very important thing as well. The core value is more of the what, and the purpose is more of the why behind why you exist as a company. I want to share a bit of an example of what we have done. So just to give you a kind of a related story here. Our purpose as a company is create a legacy across what we call 3 C's, which are customers and colleagues and community. Around mid-March timeframe, when the pandemic hit all of us pretty hard, it is easy for any company to go back to their core thing, which is I'm going to focus on my customers. I'm going to take care of my employees and colleagues in this case, because I got to protect my business. I got to make sure I can survive. I can weather the storm and all of that. But for us, by looking at our core purpose, which is all these 3 C's, we said, now how do you do certain actions? How do we do certain programs that can really serve all of those 3 C's? So late March, we came up with this program where we would deliver groceries for vulnerable citizens in our community, and we allocated $10,000 a fund where our employees would go and buy groceries for the vulnerable citizens and deliver it to their home doorsteps, in a contactless manner. But then we also created a simple technology web portal or a website where these citizens can go and request, and we served about 110 citizens, delivering, groceries for them. And that was an example of where we said, our purpose should guide the decisions we are making. Our purpose should guide the actions, we are taking as a company there. And, that was a great way to, rally the team around our purpose and say, our purpose is alive and well, and here is how we are living and living by those purpose and core values. So here are some pictures from other deliveries that we have done. And even the Governor Ducey also tweeted about the fact that, we went above and beyond to help these senior citizens and deliver groceries there. And for me, this is a good example of pivoting the organization and saying, here is how purpose actually is in play in a real life scenario. And I thought it'd be good to share that story here. So I want to give a couple of leadership perspectives as we look at leadership strategies and all of that. I want to give a couple of leadership perspectives that I think is very important for all of us to understand. So I want to go back to this paradox called Stockdale Paradox. Stockdale Paradox is a term coined by Jim Collins, who wrote one of the best business books, Good to Great. So what Jim Collins did was he interviewed Admiral Stockdale, who was kept in as a prisoner of war for 7 years. They tortured him. They did all kind of, they subjected him to all kinds of torture and everything. But then, over a period of time, he was able to come out of that and then and do really well. He wrote his, books as well, a couple of books on his own also. So when Jim Collins interviewed Admiral Stockdale, he was asking him about how did you manage to survive that tough environment, very difficult, cruel environment, being a prisoner of war. Admiral Stockdale's answer was that he was ready to face confront the brutal reality that he's not going to get out by Thanksgiving or Christmas, but he also knows at some point he's going to get out and get out of the prison over a period of time. So he had this notion of facing the brutal reality, but at the same time, having this optimism at the end that he will prevail at the end, he will come out of the prison. And he also said, I was going to turn that as one of my defining moments of my life. So what Jim Collins talks about is, this was a recent video that he released, I think a couple of months ago. He talked about the notion of how do you apply Stockdale Paradox in the context of leading your company through this COVID-19 crisis. And where he talks about is when you're talking to your employees about what's happening in the company, whether it's with respect to your customers and others, it is very important to paint a true picture of what's happening. And that's where you confront the brutal reality of what's happening right now. But at the same time, you have to make sure there is a built-up optimism built in, so they know that at the end of this crisis, you will come out stronger on the other side. So I thought it was a great perspective to have as we are dealing with this unprecedented crisis, to have this balance of facing the brutal realities and having that optimism that we will prevail at the end. I think it's a key balance to have. So there are some links here when AC had distributed the slides. You can read up more on this. This is a 7-minute video that Jim Collins talks about how to apply Stockdale Paradox in the current climate. I thought that was a fascinating view to look at it. Yeah, so that's what Admiral Stockdale said. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, but then in the middle of that, you're going to go through a lot of difficulties and challenges. Another perspective that I wanted to talk a little bit about is this notion of VUCA. So VUCA is a concept used in U.S. military for thinking about handling the external environment. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguous. And when you apply this VUCA moment in the current scenario we are dealing with, what we are talking about here is, how do you handle this very fluid environment that we are all dealing with right now? And when you have a volatile environment, the best way to deal with that is, because things are changing very rapidly, the best way to deal with that is to meet that with agility, where you're able to make decisions quickly. You're able to bring a small group of people and help them make the decisions quickly. I think the other one is uncertainty. We don't know how this is going to play out. What does the recovery path look like, and how we're going to come out of this? How long will it take to have a vaccine or a therapeutic treatment? So when you have a lot of this uncertainty in the macro environment, how do you handle that within your company? The best way to handle that is to say, I'm going to base it based on information. I'm going to talk to my customers, find out what they're going through, how I can help, and use that information to drive a lot of those decisions there. And the complexity part, this is a great time to reimagine your business. If your business has become complex over a period of time, this is a great time to hit the reset button and say, can I restructure certain things? So from a delivery, the value chain standpoint to your customers is a very simpler value chain. And then the opportunity to reimagine and restructure your business is a great time to do that now because of what we're going through. And the last part is the notion of ambiguity. How do you deal ambiguity with experimentation, where you're doing small, quick proof of concepts? You learn from that and apply the learning and make it better and iteratively get better over a period of time. So that's another key idea that you can take away and say, how do I deal with this VUCA moment right now, and think about this in the context of how you're leading your organizations on a day-to-day basis. So I also want to talk a little bit about, when you talk about leadership in this context, a big part of that is about the conversations that you're facilitating within your company, in your organization, whether it's the conversation or the communication strategies that you're pursuing. So I want to go back to this great article from HBR, Harvard Business Review, which is about leadership as a conversation. I know it's hard to read it, but I'll just paraphrase some of the key things. So this one talks about the organizational conversation from the perspective of 4 different factors. One is intimacy, how intimate you are with your colleagues, or your customers, and your employees. Interactivity, what kind of communication channels you're using. Are you allowing bi-directional communication with your employees and all of that? Inclusion, are you creating a culture that has inclusion, the diversity, belonging, and inclusion as a key part of what you're trying to do? And the last part of this is intentionality. Are you explicit about strategy? So when I say strategy, it's not just about what you're going to do, but it's also about what you're not going to do as a company. Because what you're not going to do is as important as what you're going to do as a company. So, and this this picture talks about this in the context of the old communication model versus the new model. The old model is very hierarchical, command and control model. You broadcast message and everyone understands what you're talking about. And it's a very fragmented communication. It's a one-way communication. But as you move into this new model of organizational communication, some of the key things we talk about here is, are you communicating with authenticity? Do people trust what you're saying? Are you demonstrating empathy? Are you able to put yourself in the shoes of your employees and understand the challenges that they are facing, and align your communication to be more empathetic versus one-way hierarchical communication? I think the other part is also, how do you refine the strategy of your communication using smaller bits of information communicated over a period of time, but also that information is also based on what the employees want to hear. It's not about what you want to communicate, but also it's about what they want to hear. So that's essentially what this model really talks about. And when you do that, you have an engaged workforce, which is kind of marching in the same direction. And you can use this crisis to build a stronger engagement within your organization and build a stronger bond. So when you come out of this crisis on the other side, you come out as a stronger organization. So again, you can search on this article, HBR article. There is more details about this. But I thought this was a great framework to have conversations within our organization about how to lead during this crisis. So when I think about leadership, I think about some building blocks. Here are some other building blocks you will see in the slide. Let me build out the slide here. I think the first part is transparency, especially in this crisis mode. Everybody is on high radar alert mode about what's happening. They want to know what's going on. The moment they don't know some information, they're going to make their own assumption. They're going to make up information. And most of the time, that's actually worse than what's really happening. So having the ability to operate with the level of transparency and communicating what's really happening is such a critical part of the leadership strategy at this point. Because otherwise, the anxiety, the FUD level goes up, the fear, uncertainty and doubt goes up, and then that really creates a lot more challenges for you have to deal with. It's better to be more transparent, more communicative right now than ever in your life as a leader. I think the other part is the authenticity part, which is the notion of making sure they know that you're communicating completely from where you are. You're not painting a true picture of a rosy picture of what's happening. You're trying to tell the truth as you're telling the facts as and you are there as a person sitting next to them, maybe virtually now, and telling them what's really happening in reality. And I think the other key skill is the empathy. Empathy is such an important skill set. Empathy has always been important, but it's even more important now because everyone is trying to figure out, how do I process what's happening in the macro environment to your organization, to what's happening in their personal lives, because there's a kind of an interdependency across all of them. But having that empathy and being able to communicate the challenges, the decisions, the context, all of that you're making in their shoes, putting yourself in their shoes and communicating will go a long way in telling them and marching them in the right direction from a strategy standpoint. I think humility and vulnerability go hand in hand. At the end of the day, we just have to say, we are all leaders and we are human beings as well. We have the same set of challenges that they are going through, the employees. Being humble about it and just say, I'm just another human being trying to make the best of what I can and present that view. It helps you build a better bond with them versus looking like everything is absolutely fine. You have everything under control. It just presents a wrong picture of what's really happening there. Then when you combine that humility and vulnerability and present the picture of what's really happening and tell them that you are in this together with them, you'll be able to build better relationship with them and also garner the respect over a period of time. So at this point, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about some of the key ingredients that you need to have in your environment as you are looking forward to this leadership journey here. One of the important things that we focused on as a company over the last few months is the notion of creating a psychological safe environment. And this is very important, again, even in normal scenarios, but it's even more important now, because if people can ask you questions openly, you can address them. Most of the time, it's pretty straightforward answer. But if they don't feel safe to ask those questions, it just creates a very challenging environment to lead. The first thing is create a safe venue for questions and ideas, and create a channel for people so when they have concerns or questions, they can, they may not want to bring it to their supervisor, but then, you can have a channel there. I'll talk about one of the things that we are doing within MST that may be useful for you to look at it, where people have the ability to submit anonymous questions in meetings and we get some feedback. And I'll address that openly in that meeting with the whole company as well. I'll talk a little bit about one of the tools in one of the future slides. I think another simple thing that you can do is, instead of saying, do you have any questions, frame it differently. What questions do you have? Because I think if you can pique their curiosity and get their interest up, and so they ask more questions, that makes it much, much easier, because then you're able to transparently answer their concerns or questions. And then the notion of what questions do you have sets the right mindset, for them to ask more questions and explore those answers with you. Communication, this is such a key part that I spend a lot of time on. Internal communications always take precedence. It's very obvious sometimes, we want to communicate with our customers and make sure they're okay. Of course, that is important. But I think for me, if I create a strong experience for my employees and they have a good experience, the customer experience, gets better, by default. Right? It gets better. It gets better by nature. So we spend a lot of time thinking about internal communication, and the way I look at this communication is, I want to use those communication channels or the forums to give them updates on what's happening, and using some of the building blocks I talked about, transparency. I'll tell exactly what's going on with our customers. Here are the challenges we are seeing. Here is some potential scenario that may happen, and let them know when this thing happens, here is a bunch of decisions we may have to take, and also prep them a little bit about the direction as well. As much as there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but anytime you create some level of certainty in terms of direction, that goes a long way. Because as human beings, we all crave for certainty. We all crave for some level of stability. Of course, it's very hard to create a lot of that right now, but wherever you can, focus on doing it. A couple of things that I've done is I do weekly all hands meetings now, talk to them, I give some quick updates about what's happening in the macro environment, talk a little bit about what we're seeing with our customers, and talk a little bit about what we're seeing within our company as well. I also have virtual office hours. I've blocked about 2 hours of my time every week, where any employee who wants to spend some time, they can block 15 minutes in that block and then have an open conversation with me about what challenges they have and get some perspective. I've also done this virtual breakfast lunch meetings. I used to do the CEO breakfast meeting before COVID-19, but I've moved that to virtual meetings also, where we talk to them. We bring a group of 10 employees and have a very informal conversations about, what's happening and get their perspective. The other thing that we started doing more and more is two-way interactions. We use this online polling. We use a tool called menti.com. It's a very simple tool. For example, let me go to the next slide. Here is one of the answers for one of the questions that I asked my team. So, so through the menti.com tool, what you can do is you can have a poll where employees can answer your question in an anonymous manner. They don't have to reveal their name. All they do is you give them a code, they connect your presentation through the code, and they can answer this question. For example, I asked them this question, I think a couple of months ago: describe your emotion in one word. And when the employees give answer real time in this presentation, I can see how the responses are coming in. So I get a better sense of how everyone is feeling. It's a real time. What I have here is a snapshot of the word cloud that I took as a snapshot after the meeting. But there I can see real time what's coming in, and I get a sense of how the emotional health of the organization is over a period of time. I do this every couple of weeks to get a sense of how everyone is feeling. Is it becoming more anxious? Is it getting more positive? What are the things that we can do as a company to address these core emotional aspects here? Because at the end of the day, the emotional health is even more important now than ever because of what's happening. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the environment. Being able to get a true picture of your emotional health of the organization can go a long way. So you can tailor your communication strategies and the activities you're doing, based on that. For example, we do this mindfulness sessions where we have a 15-20-minute session once a week. We have a facilitator who is coming in, an internal facilitator coming in, facilitating the session. And, we've done a lot of virtual happy hours based on that. So this is one example of where you can get a sense of emotional health of the organization in an anonymous manner as well, so people don't have to worry about it. I also use the same tool to ask another question, which is, tell me one issue that you want, most pressing issue that you want to get an answer to. And again, people type in their answers in an anonymous manner, and I see that here in the live presentation. I see the questions that are coming in, and then I can answer the questions right there with the whole team. So that gets a lot of these tougher issues out of the way, where people are not worried about revealing their names when they're asking the questions. It's anonymous. Anything is a fair game. And we answer that in a very transparent manner there. So that's a tool that has been really helpful. We started using for a couple of months now. Now I use this one to really do a lot of engagement, even in meetings as well. Not just with 100 people or 300 people, but even with a group of 15, 20 people. If I want to get some quick pulse check, I use this tool to get the pulse check, so that will drive the conversation forward. I talked a little bit about empathy. I think this is such a critical part of where we are. And this notion of demonstrating empathy for disruption is such a key part of the leadership strategy now, because everybody's working from home, and it comes with a whole bunch of other challenges, childcare, and they have, who's going to take care of the kids. Having that ability for people to be flexible while they're working from home and give them the flexibility, empower them to leverage that flexibility, I think can go a long way as you're navigating through this crisis. Because if you do a better job of leading now, you're able to build up stronger engagement, a stronger bond with them. And at the other side of this crisis, you will be able to come out with a very stronger organization with a much higher employee engagement than ever. And also focus on employees' health as well, not just what's in it for you, but also the physical health, emotional health, and all of that. I think the other part is, so this is something that we are looking at right now. As we are doing this, how can we increase appreciation, our rewards mechanism, and try to align that to core values again. Anything you can do to align to core values again is a good way to reinforce right now, because it reinforces the same message multiple times that you want to live and die by these core values, because that's what makes your organization unique. I think the other part is, this is again, you combine that with a little bit of transparency and authenticity. So, almost 6 weeks ago, we had to make some tough decisions, including, reducing employee salary. We also had to let a few people go a few weeks later after that, 6 people go. So what happened at that point was the level of anxiety went up significantly, as you can imagine. But at the same time, because of the communication, because on day one we said, hey, here's the path that we are seeing, this is going to play out. Scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. If we think scenario 1 is going to play out, here is a set of actions we may take. And same thing for 2 and 3. So we have been communicating, I've been communicating constantly about where this is going. So when the time came to do some salary pay cuts, I think team was on board. They all said, "Oh, we understand why, because we had to impact our revenue, and here's what that really means for us as a company." So they were able to rally behind that decision pretty quickly. In the same way, we had to let some people go a few weeks later, and then we did the best we can. We gave them a bit of a ramp up. Leeway, runway in terms of finding another opportunity. We communicated it. We offered resources for each one of them to say, how we can make recommendations for them on LinkedIn or help them prepare their resumes, made some targeted introductions to potential employers for them. So we've done a lot of those things. So at the end of the day, even though we made a lot of tough decisions, the overall feedback we received is, the employees were pretty happy, even the employees who are there right now, because they know that they will be treated fairly if things get really tough. But more importantly, they understand the why behind the decisions. It is not just enough to say, I'm making this decision of reducing pay cut or impacting these 7 or 8 jobs, but more importantly, the context or the why behind those decisions. The moment they understand it, it becomes much easier for them, because they are not just given the what, but they're also given the how and the why behind it. There is this notion of procedural justice, especially used in the legal context, where they want to understand, have you gone through the procedures of before you do the judgment, and have you gone through the procedure justice there? And the same thing applies in this context as well. The more context you can set, the more you can explain in terms of why, the better the decision's outcome is going to be, or the rallying behind the decision is going to be, because people understand why the decisions are made. And again, communicating all of that with empathy is such a critical part. Put yourself in their shoes and say, what are they thinking about? I'm sure they're thinking, will I be the next person in the line, or what does that mean to me, for me and my wife, or my healthcare benefits and all of that. So being able to communicate from their perspective goes a long way. Now, this is an example of virtual recognition that we do in the company. You can see here, this is based on a couple of core values, which is pride in ownership and spirit of humility. Very simple cards that we use, virtual cards that we use to recognize people for what they have done. So I want to talk a little bit about this very simple picture that I thought was a fascinating way to build trust within your organization. By the way, this is from a book called Unleashed, the Unapologetic Leader's Guide to Empowering Everyone Around You. Francis and Anne Morris wrote this book. It just came out, I think, a few weeks ago. So great book. I've really enjoyed going through this book. I would highly recommend you guys to go through this when you get a chance. So in that book, they talk about this notion of a leadership pyramid. If you want to build trust within an organization, there are 3 vectors that you have to focus on. The first one is authenticity. And the second one is empathy and logic. I've talked a lot about empathy and all of that. For your employees or colleagues, the first thing that they're going to look at is, are they really interacting with you, the real you? Are you the real person? Are you telling the truth? Are you telling the facts? Are you really authentic? I mean, that's the first part, the employees look at you as a leader. The second one is logic, which is, do they have judgment? Do they have faith in your judgment, ability to make good, solid decisions? Do they think that you're competent to lead the organization through this crisis? They're going to look at you through that logic as another lens. And the third one is the empathy. In this case, it's very simple. Do you care about them? Do you care about your employees? Or you're in it just for yourself to make money and then figure out a way to get out of this mess? So when you apply these 3 principles, authenticity, logic, and empathy, and when your people, your employees trust that you're embodying all of these attributes, the ability to build trust becomes much easier. you're able to build trust with them very quickly as well. Again, this is a very, very simple way to look at it, but something to think about in your communication with your teams, in your decision making, in your conversation with your teams. Think about how these three factors, play into your conversation or communication. And then, when you do that, when you demonstrate that day in, day out, consistently, you will build trust with your teams over a period of time. Again, I recommend for you to take a look at the book. So in summary, when I look at this crisis, COVID-19, it's been almost 4.5 months ever since we got in. It's very obvious. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. And making sure you understand that as a leader is so critical, because if you're in a good frame of mind as a leader from a physical standpoint, physical health standpoint, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health, you can do a better job leading your company. And it is not a sprint. It's not going away in the next few weeks. It's going to be a few more months. So having that ability to look at this as a marathon for yourself first is more important. Then I think, of course, you can inculcate those principles into your company as well in terms of the decisions you're making and the key decisions you're communicating to the organization. The second part is communicate more often than what you think you need to. I mean, this is such an important thing. I would rather err on the side of over communicating. For example, I have these weekly calls. Sometimes I won't have a lot of updates to do, but I still go into the meeting. We'll talk some high-level updates, take some questions through menti.com or any other open questions and address them. Because having that standing meeting also is helpful for people to know that there's a forum they can go to get the answer that they need versus not knowing what's happening there. I think the other part is think about how do you build resiliency into the organization. This is a great time. While we all look at this crisis and say, this is probably one of the worst things that have happened in our life, but also, you can also flip this conversation and say, this is a great opportunity to really build resiliency into the organization. And there is going to be more opportunities on the other side of this crisis. Even now, of course, depending on the industry you are in, there are some opportunities there. But you can look at this as a great lesson and say, what are the lessons I'm going to learn through this crisis, and build that resiliency into the organization, into your people, and really be a good leader where they want to work with you. They want to be led by you. It's a great opportunity to build a leadership story around, how you can lead your organization. I think the last part is, at the end of the day, I mean, this is all we are dealing with, people, human beings. We all have messiness associated with all of us. Focus on that safety, the emotional support. Focus on creating the tribe, the notion of belonging, and increase the appreciation, which is the matching part. When you focus on that more, you create a very strong engagement, within your company. And there are some things you can do, employee assistance programs, and they have this counseling support, employee counseling. Leverage that where you can. Mindfulness, virtual happy hour, or some other things that we've done. So I think that's all I have in terms of content. Let me unshare, and then probably we can open it up for Q&A at this point.
All right, thank you for that great presentation. We do have a couple questions in the question and answer box. The first one is, what is the name of the poll and the website, and is it free?
Yeah. So it's not free. It's the name of the website. It's called menti.com, and then that's where you can go and buy the license. I think it's about $250 or so per year that we bought, but you get a lot of interactivity from your presentations there. I think we can add that, to the answers here as well.
Could you type that website into the chat box real quick?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to type here. Give me 1 second. Okay. I don't know. It's saying it went to answered. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, it was answered. So then the next question Whenever you test the null of the hypothesis, there's no significant difference between specified populations. How can one limit observed differences not attributable to experimental error, such as when using the VUCA framework?
I have a hard time understanding what this question was, honestly. Whenever you test the null of a hypothesis, there's no significant difference. So, the way I'm not sure if I get it, but I'll try to see if I can answer it. The way I look at the VUCA framework is not necessarily as a hypothesis. The way I look at that is, I use that as a framework, as a baseline to set the overall context in which we're operating as a company. And the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And when I do that, what happens is when I have to make a decision that fits within one of these attributes, whether it's uncertainty or ambiguity and all of that. So what I do is I try to frame that into that particular attribute. Then once I do it, then I can say, you know what, if it is volatility, the best way I can handle that is through agility, because I know things are going to change. So I'm not going to make a decision assuming this is going to be the same decision 3 months from now, versus I'll just say, let's make a decision. Let's say it's a reversible decision. That's inconsequential decision. I will make a decision very quickly based on that. Apply agility as a concept there. And same thing. Each one of them. If it's uncertainty, you meet that with information there. So that's how I look at it. I look at this the overall context in which we're operating, and then in that context, based on the type of scenario I'm dealing with, I will attribute them to the right scenario, and then use the right solution to make those decisions. I hope that was useful.
You said thank you. So I want to transition a little bit. As a small business owner, someone that started at their home office, what were a couple challenges you faced starting your new business, and how did you overcome them?
For me, Rob?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's almost 8 years ago. I started as a home office as well, very similar, the question you asked, Rob. And now we have about 100 employees here in Chandler. I have about 225 employees in India. So we have we talk about a truly global organization. It's a truly global organization now. The part of the challenge, at least for me, when I started out was I didn't have, it was my first time entrepreneurship. I didn't come from an entrepreneurship, family in India. So a lot of the things about entrepreneurship, I had to learn on my own. So at that point, sometimes I don't even know, back then I didn't even know what I did not know at this point. Maybe that's a good thing, or maybe that's a really bad thing. So part of what I had to work through was, what are the things that successful entrepreneurs are doing? People say that successful people leave a lot of clues, and it's us to figure out what those clues are, and then cues are, and then follow them. For me, it took a lot of time to figure out the right strategy to apply there. And then the moment I understood that, there's a way to do this, there's a way you can learn from a support group. I'm part of YPO, for example, Young Presidents Organization. I'm part of this stage as well, where you work with a lot of other CEOs and learn from them, from their mistakes and all of that. And that support system is there at every level, whether it's the EO organization, all of that is there. I think that was a big thing for me when I started going to those support systems, learning from them. It became such a big part of that. I think the other challenge obviously was, again, being a first-time entrepreneur, I did not have a clear roadmap or a pathway to say, how do I build this into a successful company? I had no idea. So one of the things I realized at that point was, I'm going to make learning, my personal learning and growth and development, as a top priority. And that has been immensely powerful. I go through a lot of books, I go through a lot of webinars, I go through tons of materials, because what it does is it really has helped me become a better leader. Because if you have the growth mindset, where you're not worried about, I come from this background or whatever that is, and have the fixed mindset. And if you overcome that by having growth mindset and say, I can get better, I can overcome this. I may not have my, first customer yet right now, but if I do these 3 things, I have a better chance of getting my first customer. That mindset was so critical, I would say, the growth mindset. And those are the couple of things, Rob, I can think of in terms of my early days and what has really helped me through that time frame. I think you're talking on mute, Rob.
Yeah, sorry. I love that about the growth mindset and learn everything you can. I love to learn new things and apply them in my work too. So, any additional questions out there for Thiru while we've got him? We got a couple more minutes left. If you have some questions, post them in the Q&A. Oh, and Thiru, can you post your email in the chat box?
Yeah, sure. All panelists. Yeah, let me.
Excellent. So if you do have questions, you can reach out to Thiru through his email. It's there in the chat box, everybody. So let's take a look at that. As we wrap up, what would be can you share your final closing thoughts? A couple of points to help close out this session.
Yeah, so I'll just share one part. Like as part of this session here, I think it's, we're all in this, unprecedented times of our life and crisis that, probably 6 months ago, we wouldn't have imagined that we would be in this kind of scenario. But one thing that I go back to is leadership is a calling. And this is a great time to think about your leadership approach and style and say, this is a great time to lead your company through the crisis, become a better leader through the process, and really put your interest of your people at first. I think when you do that, I think the results will be there for you to see. And also, instead of getting, being bothered by what's happening, there's a lot of things you can still control that are still in your control. So focus on the things that you can control at this point. Use this opportunity to amplify your leadership skill set and really look at this as a leadership as a calling. And I think if you do that, I think you can come out of the other side of this crisis stronger leader and leading a stronger organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Thiru. We appreciate your inspirational words and the presentation you prepared for us today. We're thankful that you could join us. So just a big thank you. For all those attendees, we just want to remind you that we have our session tomorrow. Looking forward to that session, 9 a.m. You can sign up for it on the website. Lisa has posted that in the chat box, the link to the boot camp and the resource collective. You'll also be able to find on the website, at the boot camp website, the recording for this session and the slide deck later today will be available. So with that in mind, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks.